Hi, I'm Sarasi Rout, Youth Advisory Board member for the Science Center. Today, I'm talking with Joe May, a distinguished engineer, inventor, and former state delegate. Joe has a remarkable career spanning various fields, including technology and public service. As a former delegate in the Virginia General Assembly, he made significant contributions to state legislation. With a rich background in engineering and innovation, Joe has been at the forefront of numerous advancements, earning him a reputation as a forward-thinking leader. What inspired you to go into electrical engineering, whether it was something that you wanted to pursue ever since you were younger, or if there was a pivotal event or experience that inspired you?
I was at Cape Canaveral as part of a missile firing exercise, and the officer that I was assigned to made the comment, Joe, it looks like you have a genuine knack for stuff. Actually, what he said was, May, you seem to have a natural or a real knack for electronics. And that was sort of a revelation to me. So I decided, well, maybe I'll get out and go to engineering school. I was able to get conditionally admitted to Virginia Tech, and I made it. So, not without a whopping amount of hard work.
Were you ever intimidated by engineering, or was it something that you kind of went on headfirst?
My advice to people who are considering engineering is, if you like it, good, go have at it.
During college, did you face any obstacles while you were pursuing engineering?
When I came home from the service, I said, Dad, I'm thinking about going to Virginia Tech and studying engineering. And he said, well, I certainly wish you all the luck in the world. What he was saying was, you're on your own. So not having any money, I missed the GI Bill by 4 months. So I had to pay my own way, and I was able to do that fairly well.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your inventions and what inspired you?
Well, they're sort of a mishmash of different topics. One that I mentioned, a couple that I'm probably proudest of. Next time you fill your car up with gas, take a look at the gas pump, because it'll have a yellow and black sign on it that says octane rating calculated using R plus M over 2 method. That was my second patent, and I see it in almost every country that I go into, and that was from a long, long time ago. You may ask, why do I care? Worldwide, we pump about 2 trillion gallons of gas a year. If the Rout octane computer, which allows you to choose the grade that you need to satisfy your car, saves you only 10 cents a gallon, that's about $200 billion savings a year, and that's every year.
Was there any other patents that were most impactful in your opinion?
I had a couple that I am particularly proud of. One is the track curvature computer, which is a device that measures the curvature of railroad tracks. And you may say, who cares? And the answer is train operators care, because they have a distressing habit of turning rapidly left or right if the curvature is wrong. So we used to measure it manually, and we could do about 2 miles a day. And you had to do that, you had to do about 2,000 deep knee bends. And with the track curvature computer, we can do 500 miles a day. And in fact, one of our tasks was to ride over the various tracks in the U.S. and look for defects in the curvature, which is called track geometry or rail geometry. Signasigner is a handwriting reproduction machine. There's actually a front page article in the Post here a couple years ago when President Obama signed some bills into law with Signasigner, and the opposing party made him return from Hawaii to sign them in person rather than with SignaSigner. SignaSigner is a machine that records handwriting and allows you to reproduce it. So I know none of those particularly made me rich or anything, but I get satisfaction out of it.
And what is your process behind coming up with these patents?
I had a call from International Paper in Houston, Texas, and they said, hey, we've been talking to the DuPont people, and they say that you might have an idea for how to measure the ink on a bread wrapper. And I said, probably can, but who cares? Well, it turns out that people who print bread wrappers care a great deal because the ink is almost as expensive as the material. So when they're pricing them, they have to know how much ink they're going to use to print them. So I was able to turn out a machine which the printers use to measure the square inches of ink on a bread wrapper and then convert that into how much ink they need to print a certain number of bread wrappers.
What inspired you to get involved with the state government?
I guess two things, but primarily I had an older sister who served in the Virginia House of Delegates, and a female Republican is a pretty rare breed, and I'll give her credit because nobody pushed her around, and she did her duty as she saw it, and that impressed me. The other part of it was I went with her to a football game at Virginia Tech, and the guy beside me was very talkative and very friendly, and at halftime I said to her, who's the friendly guy beside me? And she said, well, that's Gerald Baliles, and he's going to be the next governor of Virginia. And I said, oh. So when he came back, I said, hey, my name is May, not Orbaugh, which is my sister's name. And if you have other fish to fry, go ahead, because I won't be offended. I'm basically apolitical. And he said, oh, no. And we had a nice rest of the game, but I was impressed by his width and breadth of understanding, and it was a nice visit. Was I ever cut out to be how many engineers do you know who are politicians? Not many.
Do you see any overlap, perhaps in your skills or anything like that between being an engineer and being involved in the government?
Yes, in fact, I was the first engineer that I knew in the General Assembly, and I eventually created the engineering caucus, and there were 4 of us who made up the caucus, and I actually enjoyed that. But I chaired quite a few things that involved either technology or the ability to manipulate numbers, and because I felt we were able to make a difference in some significant areas, I know I don't regret having served. I'm actually proud of it.
What do you feel was your greatest legislative achievement for the next generation?
Probably some of the computer trespass laws, because when I first entered the legislature, a local judge called me and he said, Joe, you got to help me. I don't have any idea what these laws are meant to do. And the answer was the reason he didn't was because they had been written by people with vested interests. They weren't trying to write good law. They were trying to write advantageous laws, advantageous to them. And most of the time that I was there, I spent in fact, I chaired the Joint Commission on Technology and Science, as well as the Science and Technology Committee, and we were able to sift through a lot of the legislation having to do with those topics.
What excites you about the future of your industry, and what concerns you as well?
I guess what excites me most about it is that it's always evolving, and there's always room for people who are willing to think and work. I see very industries industries that are more rewarding for people who really want to succeed at it. I consider my being an engineer one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I get to work at something I'd do for a hobby if I didn't make a good living from it. And secondly, I get to work with people I like and respect. Tell me how much better working can be than that.
Tell me about the helicopter safety part.
Well, I'd been flying fixed-wing aircraft for since 1993 or so. But when I turned 73, I decided I'd like to learn how to fly a helicopter. So I go over to the airport, and they laughed because they said, you know how many 73-year-old helicopter pilots we get through here? The answer is none, because they didn't think I'd make it, but I did. And one of the things you have to do in flying a helicopter is demonstrate your ability to do auto rotations. And let me tell you how you do auto rotations, because it scares the heck out of you. It scared the heck out of me. Climb up to 1,000 feet or so around the airport, and at midfield you turn the engine off. And if you do this correctly, you sink fairly rapidly at about 2,000 feet a minute. And particularly at night, you don't know where the ground is. You know it's down there, and you know it'll catch you sooner or later. So at about 60 feet above the ground, you flare to arrest the forward motion, and then at about 10 or 15 feet, you roll level again and settle to the ground. And if you don't think that's difficult, you're mistaken. So I'm doing this, and after the third one, I said, I think I've had enough fun for this evening. So as I was walking across the tarmac, I'm thinking, guys, there has to be a better way to do this. So I took the radar out of a Mercedes, which normally gives you the separation from the car in front of you, put it in the belly of the aircraft, and it senses when you're in auto rotation mode, and it calls out the altitudes, 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet, or 200 feet, 100 feet, 80, 60, and 60 is your cue to flare. That resulted in a patent, and not the least of which is night auto rotations are never fun, but even with the improved instruments. So am I proud of that? Yeah, because auto rotations kill off a certain number of helicopter pilots. When the San Francisco Giants renovated Candlestick Park, and the advertising on the outfield walls is very expensive, and they had just local businesses on the outfield wall, and they didn't have anything to speak of which was national advertising. So the question was asked, is there any way to replace that advertising with something like, a beer ad, because beer is a national drink. So the answer was yeah. And you say, okay, so how did you end up with the yellow first down line? Well, it turns out the same technology that allows you to replace the figures on the outfield walls allows you to put the yellow first down line on the ground. It's an interesting circuit because we look at every bit, each tiny little piece, and that's 6 million a second. And that little guy in there is really busy. Was this here before the game started? Yes, okay, leave it. Was it not here before the game started? Must be a lineman. Don't put the line down. I'm exaggerating, but not by much. So I always say the little guy in there really earns his keep when you have people running all over the field. Because if you look carefully, the line never goes over the lineman or anything like that. And that's because we're looking at every piece of the picture. So anyway, I We, um, we didn't make a lot of money off of it, but um, we made enough to keep us in business, and we didn't own the intellectual property. They were so busy suing each other that I think they missed the point of the whole business. The people who splice fiber optic cables, like for TV, have a problem when they want to weld them together. So they wanted a device which would tell them how much UV energy they had available to weld the two cables together. And so it was actually AT&T in Atlanta had asked me at least a year before that, can you think of some way to measure that? And I couldn't. And it finally gotten to the point where I didn't actively think about it. And one Sunday morning before daylight, I awakened, and it was apparent to me what the right answer was, and we still sell the instrument. So was it a world beater? No, but we've had it around for at least 30 years, and we still sell an appreciable number of them. And yeah, I get satisfaction out of that because it's something that people can use and have. It isn't the money. It's actually the satisfaction of having something that people use and appreciate, and it's just, they're good folks.
What impact do you think the new Science Center will have on the community?
The answer is a good and positive one, because without activities like that, the emphasis which legitimately needs to be placed on science and technology is greatly decreased. And it's one of those things where I grew up in a non-scientific community, and if I don't have the opportunity to do things like, visit the Science Museum in Richmond, they were kind enough to give me an award for my work in science and engineering, and so on. It's not a topic that innervates everybody, and it's sort of an acquired taste, I think, also. So Science Center here absolutely needs to be supported, but inventing's fun. And people who are good at it is a little bit like athletics. You know how guys who are good in athletics like to joke and play around. Well, not at all unusual where inventors are concerned. And I'm very fortunate. I have 28 patents, and I guess from a company standpoint, we probably have 75 or so, which, considering we don't have a lot of personnel, that's a pretty good number.
Do you have any advice or tips for students to kind of venture out of typical education to improve their skills in engineering, besides just, sitting in class, but any extracurriculars or anything like that?
Almost anything can add to your area or level of understanding. I considered the 3 years in the Army to be alternative training, and what it taught me was discipline. Okay, so you don't like it. If you hang on, it'll change eventually, and you'll get back to doing something that you feel is more worthwhile. So, no, self-discipline is something that's hard to teach, but for people who are, I guess, hit with it straight up, they either say, yeah, I got to do it, or nope, not going to bother, and go do something else. So, and I'm not saying that everybody should be an engineer, because they shouldn't be, but when it strikes you correctly, engineering is a great profession.
How do you think the future generation can handle any obstacles that we might encounter in engineering or the technology industry itself?
Goes back to the self-discipline and being willing to tough it out, because I don't know of anything in life that doesn't have challenges with it.
Do you have any additional advice for the younger generations regarding pursuing their passions?
My advice would be, don't behave like me, because I was an abysmal student in high school. But we got that sorted out during a service, and by the time I came to Tech, I was elected to their what I call Engineering Hall of Fame, and I'm pretty proud of that.